You guys are in for a treat today. So hopefully it works out well. You come out of here with a little bit of knowledge. But today we have Jason Baust from PCP, which stands for Pacific Coast Packing, one of the few tomato manufacturers out in California left these days. So thank you for coming in, Jason. Obviously, everyone knows Leah. So Leah, who does an excellent job presenting in that. Leah will be here, and her compadre Michael out there in that. So welcome to everyone. Appreciate you guys' attendance, and hopefully this will serve you very, very well. So appreciate that. I will give the floor to both Jason and Leah. Thank you.
All right.
We start with the video.
So just real quick, how many people sell tomatoes? How many people want to sell more tomatoes? How many people want them to sell more tomatoes? All right. So hopefully after you guys leave today, and ladies, you leave as well, that you'll learn something today maybe that you haven't known, or maybe we're expanding the business that you have. We're going to start with a short video. Pacific Coast Producers is a co-op, so we're owned by our farmers. You'll see a quick video from Frank just talking about the organic tomatoes. It's very similar to what we do with our other conventional tomatoes, but I think it helps you level set where we're at. Does anybody know where Pacific Coast Producers packs their tomatoes in California? Anybody have an idea? Anybody ever heard of Sacramento? There's a small town north there called Woodland, and that's where our tomato plant is, and that's where your tomatoes come from and under the label. And then a lot of the other companies are in the southern growing region. So we're between the Sahara Nevadas and the intercoastal mountains. So temperature is great. We'll talk about that later, but let's start with Frank. I think we've got to go up and then, yep. I think you have to.
Good. Organics are very sustainable, and part of sustainability is doing more with less. That's really what it comes down to. We're talking about organic tomatoes and sustainability. It's all tied together. It's a complete system that it is different from conventional agriculture. And it starts with the soil. Soil is a living thing. It's just not dirt. You have the biological activity in the soils, which is really the basis of your farm. Again, we need to make sure that we're providing all of the right nutrients in that soil, not just to feed the plants, but to feed every other microbe that's in that ground, helping you to produce a crop. And the way you do that is through organic means. We use a lot of compost and cover crops on our organic soils. Organic soils, because of the organic matter levels that we have, they're superior to our conventional soils. We don't have a lot of that soil loss like we would in conventional agriculture. So when the tomatoes leave my fields and go to the plant, if they're going to be whole peeled, diced, you need to remove the skin. They go to a processor that removes the skin with steam peeling. There's another form of doing that, and it's called caustic peeling, that you use a chemical reaction that removes the skin from the tomatoes. That's not good for the environment. There's a waste that comes off of that process versus steam is just water. And so the steam peeling, it ends up just a really, really great natural way of removing the skins from the tomato.
Steam peeling is really core to what we do. We steam peel 100% of our organic tomatoes. We heat the tomatoes just enough of the skin and just below the surface to boil the skin, and it gets to where it'll pop off. And then we use these little rollers that pull it off. But the cool thing that I love about the steam peel is not just that there's no chemicals used, but it's that we're able to use 100% of that tomato. So anything that doesn't come out of the peeler to be diced or say for whole peel, it all goes towards sauces, pastes, and purees. The only thing we don't use here in tomatoes is the skins themselves and the seeds. We send those out to cattle feed, and the cattle, they love it. When we're running organic tomatoes, we're generating about half of our power through running that steam turbine generator. And then the second pass of that steam is actually what we're cooking with. I would say about 2/3 of our tomatoes go through our evaporation process. And the cool thing about that is, since tomatoes are 95% water, we're actually importing in water, if you will. We're bringing in water through our fresh tomatoes, taking that water, using it all sorts of processes in the plant. And then we're actually reusing it for other agricultural purposes when we're done with it. And so we're continually reusing energy. It's super efficient.
We don't get rainfall in the summertime, so we have to irrigate our crops. We've started using drip irrigation about 25 years ago, It was through the initiatives of growers alone, with no government intervention, no rules that required us to cut back on our water. I feel like we're making it through the drought because of this investment we made a number of years ago in this drip irrigation, that we can keep irrigating our crops with less water. And that's really a part of sustainability. But all of these things, I think, provided a lot of benefits to our employees because they're working in a safer environment without toxic chemicals, with healthier soils, and are able to eat the produce that comes off the field and that's grown very holistically. I put a lot of TLC into what I'm doing, and I believe I'm producing crops that are what the marketplace wants.
We've definitely been on a path for sustainability, and a lot of it's just been because we're our own co-op and it's the right thing to do. It's a win-win for us and for the environment.
Okay.
Everybody feel like they just came from the field? Yeah? So real quick, do you want to talk about that, or you want me to talk about that before we go to the next one? So you guys saw the front of the plant, the tomatoes that just came in from the plant. This is another shot from the top, but just to kind of give you guys an idea about Pacific Coast Producers, we're constantly reinvesting into our plant. What that means for you is you're constantly getting a good quality product under your name brand product, under your distributor label. So the whole front of this plant this year is getting torn out and will be redone next year. You guys saw the tomatoes coming in that big water bath, and it's going up the conveyor belt before it gets steamed.
Like a Disneyland flume.
Yeah, and so the ripe tomatoes fall to the bottom. The ones that aren't ripe stay at the top, and those get moved on to other things. But in the organic now, everything is, we're a 100% steam peeled facility. So every tomato that we do, conventional and organic, is being steam peeled. But we're in the process of redoing this next year. This whole front will be redone, and we'll have more color sorters out front of our plant. Therefore, how many people have heard about the labor in California? The cost is going way up, right? So the only way to help offset that, not only do they not want to work only 90 days out of the year, because that's all we pack, but then it's tough to get them to want to work when they can make more doing else other stuff. So that's the investment that we're making this year. Thought I'd let you guys know that. You saw some of the stuff on the other video of what we're doing as a company.
There we go. Okay, good morning. So we're going to cover a lot of different angles. We're going to be engaged. We're actually going to get up and go back, come back, and go back again. So we don't want anyone sleeping today. But as Jason said, we are Pacific Coast Producers, but we're going to talk about all your tomatoes today because it's important that you guys get a good idea of what's sitting out there in that warehouse. We want to help you out. So the first thing, and I know we've covered this in the past, who's been here less than 2 years? Okay, good. And for my seasoned people, it's good to have a refresher course. So you have two types of canned tomatoes. You have the fresh pack and you have the remanufactured. So in the fresh pack world, and that's what we are, and you have to be careful because there's fresh pack for California and there's fresh pack for the Midwest, right? And there's some reman in California and there's some to reman in the Midwest. So we actually have 4 different categories we're going to talk about today. And it's important to know what we're talking about, and that's why you have a plethora of tomatoes back there, because unless you engage and you eat and you taste, it's hard to go sell it, right? So first of all, in the fresh pack world, as you saw in that video, that was a great video, is that when we are out there, so who knows when we start packing? Approximately. What month? July. So we pack July through about October. And that's it. So plant's turned on, runs 24/7. Once we're done, right? Everything's turned off, we cleaned it up. And it's not like in January they can go, hey, pull some tomatoes from the field, let's run that again. But it's important in our world because we're going to be interested, and we're going to talk about this. 3 things that we're going to think about is color, flavor, and yield. That's what's important in our world. So what that means, you saw those tomatoes coming out of the field, right? Going into the gondolas. So in tomatoes come out of the field, into the gondola, back to the plant, they're tested, they're sorted, they're steam peeled, and then they're chopped, they're sliced, they're diced, they're put into prepared pizza sauce, heavy pizza sauce, chopped, all different aspects. And how long does that process take? Then they're cooled. They're cooked, they're cooled, they're put into brights. Brights are what those cans are called with no labels on them. And how long does all that take? What does that say up there? 4 to 5 hours. So that's coming out of the field into the warehouse Completely done. And once it's in the can, it's done. It's not going to be created into any other product. So that process is 4 to 5 hours, because in our world, time and temperature are our natural enemies, right? How quick can we process it at the least amount of temperature to get the best results? And that's what a fresh packer is worried about. Now, that can be a fresh packer from the Midwest or from California. But let's go over to the remanufactured. What remanufactured means, and is, think about this. So, and you can have California or Midwest. It's going to come out of the field still. It's going to go through the sorters. It's going to get processed. But for the most part, the majority of their product goes into what we call industrial paste. And as we've talked about, is that paste that you're going to open up and make chili in the fall? No. That's paste that we're going to fix 75 with, right? What do we want to take out of that paste? What's our goal? What are we taking out of that tomato?
Water.
Water, exactly. So our goal, their goal in the remanufactured world is to take as much water out of the product, put it up. So as the year goes on, they're going to call off and say, hey, Johnny, we're out of what they call heavy pizza sauce. We need more. So they'll pull the paste out, they'll reconstitute it or remanufacture it. And as they're doing that, when you cook something over and over, what do you do to the colors?
Dark.
You darken it, exactly. What do you do to the flavor when you cook something over and over? You dissipate it, exactly. It's not as, here's your technical term for the day, it's not as tomatoey, right? And then what do you do to the yield when you cook something? What happens, here's your science note for the day, is that the tomato molecular structure cannot hold on to the water anymore. It can't, so it ends up blowing it out. Now, why? So let's talk a positive note for them. Why do they want to do all that? Why do they want to put it into paste and then as they need something, make it throughout the year? Maybe dollar signs? It's more efficient that way, right? Because they can make what they need. Now, here's the bad note. Let's say Johnny read the forecast wrong and he made tons of pizza sauce and not enough prepared sauce, right? So they could cook it up to 3 times. So as they cook it over and over, you're going to definitely see the color, the flavor, and the yield change over time. So that's the biggest difference between those two that you'll see out there. Now, one more note. Let's talk about Midwest versus California. What do we get almost every single day in the Midwest? Rain. Okay. So when you're growing, let's say tomatoes in your backyard, what do you notice they end up sitting in a lot here in Ohio and Indiana and Michigan?
Water.
Water, exactly. So when it sits in the water, and it's no different for the Midwest fields, it's not their fault, it's the environment they've been handed, they're going to sit in the water too. So when it sits in the water, think about it. The pocket of the tomato, right, it absorbs that water. So you're not going to have the same meatiness that you get from a California product. And that's just the nature of where it's grown. So Midwest versus California, there will be a difference in the tomato structure. So that's another variation between the two. So our pros and cons, like we talked about, fresh pack versus reman. Our fresh pack product, because it's going to be processed how many times?
Once.
Once. Our color would be more vibrant than the California packers. And if you're a remanufactured packer, only because of the process it goes through, you're going to have a darker color. It's going to be less vibrant. So then you go down to flavor. So here's your technical term of the day. So with your flavor, because I'm processed once, it's going to be a brighter note, right? It's going to be more tomatoey in a product. Whereas when you're in a remanufactured, it's more subtle. Now, you may run into some accounts and just know this. So that's something to think of. And we've got this many, many times in my 32 years. You're put the sauce on there, like, woo, that is so tomatoey, Leah. Like, ugh, that's way too tomatoey. So with that comes to mind, you have a solution. Well, this weird lady taught me there is an alternative, and I can bring you a sample of something that may not have that intense flavor, but it's going to be a little bit darker in color. Is that okay with you? So make sure they understand the good and the bad of what they're getting. But that could be an option for them. You may run into that. Yield. Yield is a big deal when we talk about tomato products. What do I mean by tomato products? The paste, the purees, the heavy pizza sauce, things that you're going to add what to? I'm going to add water to, right? And you go up to Michigan, people want to stretch their dollar. That's important to them. So I want to stretch my dollar out. Well, when I'm dealing with a fresh packed California product, because of how it's processed, it can still hold on to the water. And when we go through products, you're going to see how certain products have a higher yield. But remember, as my yield increases, my flavor and color decreases. As my flavor and color increases, my yield decreases. So as things become more concentrated, I'm cooking it a little longer to pull out what? Water. So as I do that, in the natural scheme of tomatoes, it's going to get a little darker and a little less tomatoey. So it's important to talk to your customer. What's important to you? You want more yield? And how you do a yield test, it's not open the can and take a look at it. It's what kind of water can they add back to it and stretch their dollar. And that's also super important when you're doing case costs side by side. Be careful on that, because when we get to the heavy pizza sauces, that case and that what I call the viscosity or the brick scale, it's different from packer to packer. So make sure when we're doing it, you call Michael up, you call me up, and you say, hey, Leah, we're cutting against this product. I need to get, what do they use for a batch? They need 3 cans. Fine. Let's make sure they can make a batch, because opening a can to opening a can, that's not a true yield cutting. What a true yield cutting is how much did I get out of that case? And an example is, okay, this case, and it's a remanufactured heavy pizza sauce. And Jason's going to show you after this what we mean by that. That product there, typically, I can't add water to. So how many cans are in that case? 6, exactly. So let's say you take one of your heavy pizza sauces into the account, and you're like, okay, sir, you want a little bit brighter color, correct? Oh, yeah, that'd be great. Okay, I'm going to show you with our fresh pack California sauce. Now we can add, let's say even we can add a half a can of water to each can. How many cans are in that case? 9. So what you do, a true yield test, is you would take your first case that they're already using, and you take that cost and you divide by how many cans. If they can't add water to it, what are you going to divide? 6. So yours that you brought in, they can stretch it to about 9. So what do you take your case costs and divide by what? 9. That is a true yield test. If you go case to case, you'll lose. You're going to lose. But you got to show them what's the value of the product. How am I going to stretch my dollar? So that's a huge aspect. When you're doing yield and you're adding water, that's how you do pricing for your customer. So, and that's where we come into play to help you do a correct yield test. So we are going to now get up, go back, and we want to show you the difference in the color, flavor, and yield real quickly. And we're going to come back on a remand versus a fresh pack so you guys can take a look at it.
How many people know the first indicator of being able to educate your customer and if their product is fresh packed or remanufactured? Does anybody know? What's the first thing how you should educate your customer, or maybe they do know? Nobody has a clue? So there's 2 ways. Sometimes people put it on the can. They'll put fresh packed tomatoes on the can, on their label, and they'll call it out that way. That's how you could know that, right? If it said fresh packed on here, that would be a clear indication it's fresh packed. But if they don't have that call out on the label, you guys need to be able to educate the customer, right? Like, hey, there's a difference in the product, and here's why. If you can't tell them that, then they think you're a liar, and we don't want that. So we're going to look at these 3 items right here. Can anybody tell a difference within those 3 items?
And think of the 3 factors we just talked about.
What's the number one thing that she said? It's dark, right?
Yeah.
So that's dark. These 2 are bright red, correct? So I need 2 volunteers to read something. I'm going to give you 2 cans. I need 2 of you. Come on. Don't worry. There is product in the can, so don't let it down, please. What's that? Can you read the ingredient statement for me?
Tomatoes, sea salt, dehydrated onions, dehydrated garlic, spices, natural flavorings, sweet bell pepper, citric acid.
Okay. Can somebody read this one? Come on.
You're up.
Come on. I just need some.
Tomato puree,
So that should be your stopping point right there with your customer, because tomato puree means what? Tomato puree is down there, right? So they've used tomato puree to make tomato sauce. This manufacturer used what to make tomato sauce? Tomatoes. Okay. So your customer who's buying a product that they're saying the price is much different, like you went in at, let's just say $20 and they're buying this for $15, which I know those prices are 1976. I'm cool with that. But that should be your first indication if a price is out of line, to make sure you look at the ingredient statement. Now, the thing you'll have to sell against is they've been using the Hunt's brand forever, and their product looks like that, and you're going to bring them in a fresh pack product to do that. So the number one thing is also you don't want it the other way, right? Where you've been selling them a fresh pack product forever, somebody comes in with a lower price product and shows them that. So my big takeaway from that is to tell your customer, why would you sacrifice your recipe?
Yep.
Right, because these are recipe ingredients, meaning they're making something further with that. So if they're switching from a fresh pack product to a remanufactured product, they're lowering their quality, which in today's world, I don't think our customers give us a second chance. They get on Yelp, give you a bad complaint, and they're out the door, right? So make sure you're talking to your customers about educating them. Don't sacrifice your recipe based on a price.
Okay.
Leah's got another one over here.
So now we're going to go, we did color flavor. Now I'm going to have you look at yield, like we talked about. So you're doing, let's take your Sofo product. This is a Sofo heavy pizza sauce, but as we go down, and we're going to do this afterwards too, so don't worry. But we're going heavy down to not so heavy. But I want you to look, this one here, red pack, once again, first ingredient, tomato puree on this product. But if you look at this, this is their extra heavy pizza sauce. Now to me, that's closer to your prepared on there. Now the only reason I say that, once again, I'm not belittling anyone. It's just the process on how this is being made. So if you want yield out of a product, it's going to be really hard to cut this product with water, okay? Whereas if I go here with a heavier product, now you'll notice though, it gets, even between these two, it gets darker, right? And that's because I get more yield out of this one than I get out of this one. But I get a brighter color out of this one. When I go down here to the red pack, I'm not going to get any yield. So I'm going to have to pretty much just use this out of the can and add my spices to it. So that's just kind of a visual we want you guys to see. And we'll come back to that, and we're going to go through all these with you guys. So don't worry to understand what you're looking for. But that's your visual. Flavor, color, yield. Jason's going to break down. Now, one more thing I want to add. That fresh pack burst, be very careful. Because fresh pack, remember, can be also Midwest. Can I remanufacture a whole peeled tomato out of Indiana? If I have a whole peeled tomato, can I recook that into something else? No. Can I recook a diced out of the Midwest into something else? No. So technically, those are fresh pack. So be very careful. That fresh pack burst could be California, could be Midwest. So that's why it's important to know this slide that Jason's going to go over on where things come from.
Thanks, Leah. You guys ready? All right. I'm going to try and step my game up to Leah because she's on point. So I've been in your all shoes before, so I like to talk about this from your all standpoint, right? Like what you guys are competing against, what you're seeing that's out there. How many people know how many private label canners there are? Anybody have a guess? Anybody have a guess?
6.
Anybody have a guess?
Look at his hand.
Anybody have a guess? Jokes are over. So there's only 5 of us in the world right now. Now, years ago, there was multiple, so we're down to 5, right? Important thing to know when you guys are out there cutting against the competitors that are out there, name brand or national brand. There is, under the fresh packers, you've got Pacific Coast Producers, which is me, Stanislaus Escalon, and Neil Jones. We all have our different nuances. We're not going to get into that. But just so you guys know, when you're competing against any other distributor label that's out there, it's packed by one of these manufacturers. We do, Red Gold does do private label. I'll get into why we've put them down here versus why they're up top. But these are all fresh pack California suppliers in the market that do private label. One of them that does not do a private label is this one. They do their name brand. They do a very good job out there, and they got a great following for it. So
They have some grandfathered items,
Right.
but no new items.
We'll kind of help you guys with some different sales tips that I've found successful, that Leah's found successful to help you with that. But we know customers are brand loyal, no different than when we get them to your brand, they're going to stay brand loyal and stay there with you guys and gals. Red Gold, well, Escalon, we have Escalon on here. I like to call it Kraft because Kraft Heinz owns Escalon. So for me, I'm more new school. This Escalon's the old school. That's the brand that everybody recognized before. I think of them as Kraft Heinz. And then Neil Jones.
Not even old, so there you go.
Neil Jones does some of the labels under Bellissimo, Orizio, and that. Red Gold. The reason why I didn't include them up there because they do buy tomato paste from California in bins, and that's what they use a lot. Those that are back there, a lot of your tomato paste is made from bulk paste from California. But where it's manufactured, some chefs like to call it cooked twice. We call it remanufactured because it sounds better for us. Chefs like to say cooked twice because it sounds better for them. It's a play on words. But they use our tomato paste to do a lot of their products, even when it gets down into the ketchup, which some of these other people use as well. So they're buying it at a high consistency, and then they're watering it down. Hunt's, you guys saw that back there? Same thing. Contadina, Heinz, she's got Heinz down here, Prego and Ragu. I don't really get into these. I don't see a lot of that in the food service side. I do see it in the retail, but I don't see it a lot on the food service side. This is where I focus. I think the main thing for you guys to take away, understand where the tomato comes from. A tomato is how much water versus solids. Anybody remember what Frank said? Or Josh, actually. What was it? 95% water is a tomato. The drip tape that you saw there from Frank is now underground. It's not above ground anymore. When they first started with the drip tape, it was above ground. Now we're doing it underground. The difference that Leah touched about between California and Midwest tomato, California, it's not only just the amount of water you guys get here. I live in St. Louis, so I get the same amount of water you guys get. But it's also the temperature, right? We all know in the summer there might be one day it's 110, the next day it's 60 degrees, right? And then the next day it's back and raining. So that temperature fluctuations with the moisture hurts the tomato capability. I had somebody tell me once that the soil in the Midwest is going to be very similar to what's in California. If you believe that, I got sand, I'll sell you. It's from China. Very good sand, white, beautiful. It won't hurt your feet when you walk on it. However, that's not the case, right? What you can't make here is the environment in California. It's 100 degrees at night. Tomatoes get big and plentiful, and then at night, in the day it's 110 degrees. Sorry, I had it backwards. At night it's 70 degrees, so they swell back down. Then during the day they get big again, and then at night they come back down until they get to the full mature ripeness, which gives us that consistency. So we're always checking to make sure our variety is performing, and Frank's doing that with test plots through UC Davis. So we're doing that. Any questions on the manufacturers that are out there? Yes, sir.
If Neil Jones, they do Orizio, which is Cisco.
Uh-huh.
What are the differences between, if they both pack Bellissimo and Orizio, what are our differences between Orizios?
On that one, I'll be honest, there's very...
We're going to go over can codes.
Well, we'll go over can codes, but he's saying that Neil Jones packs both. It's a fair question. So you is the difference.
Okay.
This company's the difference.
Yeah. Yep.
Your value versus their value, right? That's what, when you go in there, that's why I'm honest, because sometimes you are going to compete against yourself. When it comes to, there used to be several canners, there's not. Okay, so you're going to compete against yourself when it comes time to time, or you're going to compete against me somewhere else. That's going to happen. You have to sell your value. Don't sell yourself short and sell everything that you do to get them to maintain with you. Okay?
And that's why we're your resource, because that's something, after 32 short years, I can help you. You know, you take a picture of the label, you send it to Michael and I'll say, this is what you need to go in with. So that's our value, to help you with that.
Very fair question, because
It is.
I think you guys should all, and gals, should understand that and not shy away from it when you're in there, but also understand that you can attack it. Then it comes down to your comfort level with the customer if they're not switching because they believe that other label's better, right? And you know for a fact in your heart to heart that it's the same product. We can strategically help you. So Leah said after we pack the product within 4 to 5 hours, did anybody catch what she said we do with the cans?
It goes into what?
They're brights, right? So there's no label on them. So we've just put the right lipstick on it that's ordered. Okay, we put the right label on it that people want. Does that make sense? And from that label, there's only certain things within that label that has to be on there based on the government's regulations. So it can still be the same product, but read differently on the label based on how somebody's marketing it.
And we're going to talk about that back there too.
So,
Yeah.
yeah, when you see label changes, customers freak out, right? You're always going to see that. Even if we change the Bellissimo label, right? Like all of a sudden marketing's like, hey, you know what? This blue's a little too navy. Let's go a little lighter blue, like sky blue. Your customers flip out, right? You're like, dude, the printer messed up, man. That's all that happened, the printer, right? Like it was supposed to be navy and now it's sky blue. Those are going to happen. And I think when we'll show you the can codes, we'll talk about that. Understanding those, because remember, there's how many canners?
5.
There's not many, right?
There's 4. There's 4 California.
So being able to see a can code and helping you guys, and I'm not expecting you to leave here and be an expert on what the can code is, right? But if I can help you understand the private label can codes, they're not going to change no matter whose label's on it. Does that make sense? So if you left here understanding these, this take care of itself because it's name brand. Does that make sense?
And honestly, remanufactured privately, you have one main person that does almost all of them. That's why you see a lot of names under that for a reason. So the other thing I was going to mention real quick is on the California Fresh Packers. So you have, they're all in the same region. It's called the San Joaquin Valley. So you have Escalon, Heinz, they're the most north. And then there's Pacific Coast Producers, then there's Stanislaus, and then there's Neil Jones. But they're all in the same region. So, and that's just kind of something to think about as far as the, no one gets better sun, no one gets better lack of rain, no one gets better earth. It's all in that same, that's why it's all grown in that area.
How many people hear your customers complain about citric acid being in your product? Everybody? Well, several? Does anybody know, is citric acid natural in a tomato or not natural in a tomato? Anybody?
It is. That's natural. It's natural.
Citric acid is what?
It's natural.
In a? So those that you hear when you hear a brand out there talk about they do not add citric acid to it, there's a reason for it. Why do you think a company would add citric acid to a product? Anybody have an idea? There's a pH level, right? Anybody know what pH is to maintain, to keep from botulism, also from a can exploding, right? I bet you if I didn't control that level and those cans exploded in your warehouse, Rob might not be happy with me, right? I think if your customers had tomato cans in their back room and you showed up the next day after the can exploded in the back of their warehouse, I bet they would not be happy, right?
They may be salty.
So citric acid is only used to control pH level. Now, you're going to say, well, why do we have it on the label, right? We only need to use it to control pH, correct? But we talked about labels a minute ago, right? And then if we change the color on a label, what happens? Customer says it's different, right? So if we took and only put citric acid on the label when we had to use it, and we switch labels every other run maybe, it could be every other year, but how many questions would you guys get from your customers if we had to, this week it's on, next week it's off, right?
It's only when it's necessary.
So it's only used in production to control pH. If pH is above 4.4, the cans will start to swell. And we don't want swelling. We're going to talk a little bit about pack. Leah touched on it. Filled from 4 to 5 hours. I think
the video touched on
the
it.
video did
Yeah.
most of this slide.
Yeah.
But I think it's important to know that the tomato is 95% water, right? So when you talk about, I always have people at the gym, right? All the trainers are like, hey, you have to shop the outside of the gym, right? It's the freshest product there is. How many people have customers that say, I make sauce from fresh tomatoes? Anybody? You do? What color are those tomatoes that they're picked to be fresh? Do you know? They're green, right? For a fresh tomato to be red when you receive it at the grocery store, it's picked green. Because if it was picked red, what color would it be when you picked it up in the grocery store? Right? So nobody would eat it, right? So I always have to laugh when somebody tells me they make fresh something from the outside of the grocery store, or even from, you guys sell fresh tomatoes, right? But we know that they're not fresh. So when they're making their salsa from fresh, or they're making their sauce from fresh tomatoes, you're losing that actual tomato flavor from not buying a tomato that's picked. What color are these? This was our picture from 1927 when I was a kid. And there was all the whites in there. It's not that way anymore.
Some of us are excited. I'm just going to say.
So yeah, everything. All of us pick the tomatoes from the same fields. They come through here to here, and it's just a matter of who puts them from here to inside their plant the fastest, right? And we do it from 4 to 5 hours. I so want to get a beam on one when we're out there to plant tour to see it go through the facility to see if we can watch it from the field, but that'd be kind of scary too. From there, it's bright canned. We talked about the plants. So they're actually, I didn't put it on here, but the plants are going in the fields now. The organics are in, but the conventional tomatoes are going in. Last year we ran out of product, right? And you guys probably had to face headwinds. I think Rob took a position. You guys might not have ran out. But we did as a company because we were 2 weeks later getting in the fields last year because all the rain. And you guys are like, well, 2 weeks, well, what's that matter? Well, it matters because think about this. The seedling starts in a greenhouse, grows to about a foot, and then we transplant it to the field. They don't have enough greenhouse space to put all the tomatoes in there that we need for the entire acres that we plant, right? So they do them in phases. So the first plants get planted, they grow to a foot, they then move them to the fields, they plant the next variety, and if they all bloomed at the same time, do you guys think we could harvest them? Probably not, right? So it's actually a science. They start a seed at a certain time. They know when the maturity is going to hit so we can use it to turn the plant on, and then the next varieties keep coming throughout the pack season. This year we packed to October 15th, which is not normal. Normally it's like the first week of October. It's like we shutter those doors. I've been in sales before. I used to hate it when I'd go pick up a large account, and then 3 months later I wouldn't have product, right? And then that large account's like, you jerk. What'd you do that to me for? I'm like, because I wanted money. But I wanted your business. And I want it tomorrow too, but when I get it back in. So it's very important that you work with Leah and Michael and Rob as you pick up business to make sure that if you do have a large account, right? There's, was there 20 of us in this room? And others out there in the market. So if everybody goes after the same item, hypothetically speaking, and each person picks up 3 cases a week, which isn't a lot to you, next thing we notice it was a pallet a week of an item that we only had forecasted at 3 cases a week. So it's very important that we communicate because I don't want any of you to fail when you go out to move business over. So please, if you have a customer that's buying a large volume, make sure you communicate with Leah and Michael, and we can make sure inventories are such. We're in the middle of pack plan right now. We'll start packing, roughly July. We'll start organics, and then we move right into conventionals after that. But Leah's expertise is she's known as a pizza queen, I think is the most political way to say that. So she's going to talk about how our products perform differently and help you sell through that.
So, when we do trainings, I always touch on ovens, because ovens are going to be the catalyst to different things we're going to think about as you're walking in the account. So as we talk about deck ovens, where does all the heat come from on a deck oven? Bottom. Comes from the bottom. So remember, we have several elements for our za shots, right? We have the dough, we have the sauce, we have the cheese, we have the topping. So I want you to think about, where did I add the sauce? In between what? Crust and the cheese and the topping. So it's sandwiched. What did Josh say the makeup of a tomato is? How much water? 95%. So think about that as we go through these ovens, because it's important. And it's important when we're back here to get an idea of what kind of product we're going to walk in the door with, or how can you be a solution. So how many of you order pizza, like me, pick it apart, and you have what I call pizza grains on the crust, right? Where it's wet. Can I poke it? You? Gross. Okay, there's reasons for that. So deck oven, heat from the bottom, right? If I have heat all coming from the bottom, it's going to go into the crust. I'm going to be able to penetrate the moisture in the sauce. Sauce in a fresh pack will give you 51% of the flavor, so that's important, but it also can make or break your whole structure of your pizza. I go to the conveyor oven, which this market has turned a lot to. Where does all that heat come from?
Plus.
And?
Side.
Bottom. So now I'm going to disperse it both ways. So think about it. If someone was with a deck oven and they moved to a conveyor oven because of labor, I now cut my heat source on the bottom in half. So if they were, let's say that they were out there, and this is a big deal I've seen up and down the coast the past year. Let's say they were using a whole peeled plum tomato. That's what they did, right? And they emulsified it with the emulsion blender. They threw spices in, and they used that whole peeled. They did it on their crust, and they had a deck oven. Well, labor's been a bitch. Oops. So now we went, just. So now we go to a conveyor oven because of labor, and they continue to do the same thing. But then they say to you, man, there's something wrong with these tomatoes you're selling me. I know there's something wrong with them because my crust isn't getting done. Why might their crust not be getting done? Is it the tomato's fault? No. But what is happening when I disperse that heat? Exactly. So what you may have to do is help that guy understand you can continue to use your whole peeled plum. We may have to add a little puree to it. We may have to add a little paste to it. What are those things in a fresh pack, right? Because what is it going to do? Absorb what? The water, exactly. It's going to make it a little bit tighter of a product. It's going to help him on his end result pizza. Now we get to the evil oven, the convection oven. Where's that heat come from? It goes all over, right? There is no direct heat. So if you have someone going, I'm going to serve pizza. What kind of oven do you have? Oh, dear Lord, no. That's what they have, right? And they're like, I want to do a 16-inch fresh dough, and I'm going to emulsify my tomatoes, and I'm going to do cheese. And I'm like, once again, I'm going to make you successful in that when you hand over about $1 million to me. We're going to be on the same playing field. So with that being said, you have to think about the moisture. So in that, am I going to go more of the grounds and the whole peeled, or am I going to lean more toward maybe a prepared, heavier pizza sauce? Why am I going to do that? Yeah, it's less water. I need something that can tighten it up on the dough. Now, I'm probably going to go some sort of a par bake too, right? I'm going to go that direction because I got to get rid of the water. That's the goal here. So now, the extreme opposite, I'm going to do the open flame. Where's that heat come from? The back, right? We're blasting about 800 degrees there, right? Those are those 90 seconds. It's going to be a miracle. So now am I going to take out the moisture or add the moisture? Add the moisture. So in that factor, if they're doing a heavy pizza sauce, what's going to happen to their dough? Exactly, it's going to be too dry. So in that aspect, let's say they're doing a heavy pizza sauce, I may suggest they add some ground peeled to it. Add a little moisture, add a little freshness, and add something to protect that pizza in the oven. So those are things when you're out there, make sure you're understanding that water is trapped. How do we work that water and disperse it best for the equipment they have? So think about that. So you have your blue steel pan, right? And I'm going to Crisco that thing. And then I'm going to put my dough down. And then it's going to rise. And then I'm going to put my cheese on it, my toppings. Why am I not going to put sauce on that dough? Think about that pan. What happens when I add that moisture? It makes the dough do what? Sinks. When you're doing a Detroit style, you want airiness. You want crunch. You want that pretty even dispersion of dough. So that's why the sauce goes on after, is because now the structure's been set. I can add it, and I typically, well, your new Primavera. I typically take that product and I'm going to take it over the top because it's set. It's not going to sink anymore. That's why they wait till the end. So same thing with like a grandma pie. You'll see them doing the same thing. They'll kind of par bake that dough, bring it out, and then put the sauce on because you want that cell structure to set. So that's their goal on that.
Leah, but on that Detroit, I misunderstood the question, but is there a water-based sauce that works best for that?
What we do for that, you're going to do, so typically they'll take a heavy and mix it with a ground, or that's why we created the new sauce. I take a prepared and I mix it with a ground because you got to have some texture to it. It can't be super thick. If you're up in Detroit or anywhere that does Detroit style now, they like that, and you can add a little bit more texture to it. I call it the tomato particulates, right? I want that. I don't want heavy, pasty. That's not what goes on the Detroit style. It has to have the tomato particulates in the product, but you can do that because the cell structure's been set. So, good question. Anything else? On these two slides, Michael and I wanted to catch, just because we have a huge, I think there's 39 cans back there we're going to go through, to give you a snapshot, and we do have literature back there to know what products we're helping you with. So as we go through these, just kind of, and I know that you don't have to memorize them, we have it back there for you, but just to give you an idea, the paste, the purees, sauce, both whole peeled, so you're going to have a whole peeled round, and then you're going to have a whole peeled pear tomato with fresh basil. So where am I going to sell the whole peeled round typically? It's It's more of the commodity tomato. Where am I going to go with that?
Olay, 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 olay.
Margaritas.
Mexican.
There we go.
There you
There
go. And then the whole peeled pear tomato with basil, where am I typically, what genre am I going to go with that? Italian, exactly. So firmer, sweeter, brighter note of color. So there are definitely places. So be careful though, because if you're looking more commodity, you want 210630. If you want higher end, better product, and we have what we call our competition, you carry it, but out there on the street, you're going to want the whole peeled pear. We also do the chop. Now, Jason brought up a very good point. Remember we talked about labels. Things come out in brights. It's whatever we wrap it with. If you're out there on the street, you guys, Bellissimo calls it the chopped tomato. It's the same as a strip. It's also known as a kitchen cut. So there's a lot of different names for the exact same genre of product, which is basically known traditionally in the market as a tomato strip. So that's another thing, good point that he brought up on that. Ground peeled, we're doing that for you guys. And then you have the 3 Bellissimo pasta sauces that we're doing as well. So I just wanted you guys to see that.
All right, everybody ready to become an expert on how to read a can code? All right. We're going to go through our can code so you have it. But the main thing is when we get back there to understand the can codes of who's packing what, right? I don't expect you guys to be able to know exactly, exactly how to read, but what's the most important to Leah is this information right here. Yep. This tells me the year it was packed and the date that it was packed. Does that make sense, a Julian code? This tells me the product. This is the product code right here. So when you're communicating with Leah and you're having a challenge, right, something doesn't match up, if this code and that is written in that order on the can, that's my product. It won't have anything on the bottom, but it'll have everything on the top, not spaced out. Does that make sense? And we'll show you that in the back. But if that can code looks like that, then that's call Leah or Michael. And then they'll call me, and I won't answer. So if you want my card, no, I'm just kidding. And the other stuff is kind of important stuff as far as when we're packing it if there's a quality issue. Does that make sense? So if there's a quality issue, this is what we need a sample of. We tend not to have many quality issues, but we do know that they do happen. This is so you know when you're out there cutting against product. You asked a very good question earlier. This will let you know if it's us in that can and if you have to sell differently around the actual product that's in the can. Make sense? On our retail, this is information from our retail slide, but our retail cans, because the government, we do a lot of retail that's out there as well. So a lot of stuff you buy at Walmart or your local grocery store is packed by a great manufacturer in the California market called Pacific Coast Producers. And it has a best by date on it. You guys don't have that we don't have that on the food service side. I wanted to go back and touch on this real quick. So I think it's important. I don't know how your all's laptop works, but when I was a sales rep and if I would Google, or not, I say Google because that's what you search the internet, but when I would search my product listing, if I typed in tomato strip, this product would never come up. Right? So if you're trying to compete against this tomato strip, you're like, gosh darn it, why don't I have it on my label? You do. So one of the big takeaways I'm glad Leah touched on is make sure that you understand that the chopped means stripped. I would think chopped means diced, but the chopped means stripped. And the reason I also want to point that out on the retail, if you guys ever go to the grocery store, you'll see about 1,000 different things in that tomato set. Most of them are the same, even though the branding looks different. So the can codes on the top of the cans on retail as well will tell you, no different than you'll see back here if it's us or if it's a Midwest canner that's packing it. But that'll also tell you if it's the same product, just a different price with a different label on it. But there are several other other distributors out there that have the same branding on their can. Okay, so it says chopped as well. You guys can figure it out, but you'll see it out there. You'll know that if it says chopped, you're going to look in your laptop and your product listing for chopped tomatoes, and this one's going to pop up, right? So you'll know that you'll have the exact match. But if you see tomato strips, or I think there's one that says 75 plus, there's one that says 74.40, understand the chopped in your laptop will go against that. Make sense? Any other questions on can codes? We just wanted to briefly go over it, touch on it, so you guys understood that. We'll do a little bit more back there to show you the difference so you can help with that.
I was going to talk about, so this is just some examples of targeting, when you're going to take your brand and go out there in the market, in your market. I tried to pick specific labels that you see more in your market versus I would do a different target sheet for people down in Kentucky and Tennessee. So you guys have quite a bit of the Alta Cucina and the Valorosa up here. So, and for the people, just, I had a 21 histories in that category, so I'm pretty familiar with the products, how they cut, what they cut against. The Alta Cucina is a whole peeled pear with basil, and it's supposed to be in juice. The Valorosa was always the secondary cut, and it was a whole peeled, it used to be a whole peeled pear with no basil in puree. It has now had, in the past several years, basil added to it. Why? I don't know. Your Bellissimo whole peeled pear is always with basil. So you'll have that same meaty texture as we talked about, and that's what I would target. Also, I would target the imports out there. You have a lot of imports. Gordon loves to push the imports out there too. Reason why I say that is that think about COVID. Now things have gotten better, but when those imports came in to the ports, how quickly did they get through customs back then? 5 months? 4 months? So they sat in containers, and what was on top of them as they sat in the containers? What's in the sky that we normally don't have in Ohio? Sun. Okay, so as it sits in the containers, was it cooking them? Yeah. So we noticed over the past couple of years, it was much darker. It wasn't as sweet as they used to be. So that's something I would take your Bellissimo product out and go target. I mean, when you're out there, you see it, sell your brand. That's a great target. Don't walk away from that.
Lee, if I can touch on that. On the imports real quick, how many imports are exactly a number 10 can? They're not, right?
Cheater cans.
So make sure when you're going out and competing against that, you're looking at that, right? The other thing is on the labels, even on the Tavellini label, if it's an import, it'll say on the label if it's an imported product. The other cans, because I don't think on that Tavellini label it's the cheater can, but all the other import tomatoes that are out there are a cheater can.
No, they have that black label. I think it's a Famoso brand that they put out there, I believe. That's their import on it. So the ground peel, be careful once again. You still stock the unpeeled, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so you have the peeled, make sure you're going against the correct product, because you got a peeled and you got an unpeeled, right? So the unpeeled means I have the seeds and I have the skins. If it's peeled, I just have the seeds. I don't have the skins. So make sure you're comparing apples to apples. We can help you on the ground peeled product, which is going to go up against what? Out in the field. Now, if you have the business, I understand. You have this in-house too, right? But let's say you're in a bidding war out there with your competition. Sell your brand because you own the brand, right? They don't have the brand. The other things I would go after, you also have, there's a Tavellini. And what did we just talk about? Who packs that? GFS. Arizio. Who's that? What distributor? Cisco. And we have a couple cans up there if you look at. And also 6-in-1 ground, which is, I'll say Escalon, he'll say Heinz. But in that case, that's where I'm going to go against, and those are going to be my targets. Your gourmet pasta sauce. That product is the one with the carrot puree, the natural sweetener in it, has the onions in it, great color to it, awesome flavor, natural sweetness to it. That item is neck and neck with your al dente, right? And actually, I'll show you some things up there when we go through. Also, you want to look at the Arizio Premium Pasta Sauce. Where are you going to see this one? Cisco. Your Allegro pasta sauces. Where do you see and find those? I know you have some here, but where else do you see them? GFS Marketplace. They have them all over there. So that's where I'm going to target for that. So just to give you some targets out there, because I think that's important. Where do I go? Where do I find new business? That's where I'm going to look. Just some ideas.
And when we talked about earlier, there's only 5 private label canners out there, right? If it was me and I was in your shoes and I go back, I don't know, 20 years, I would want to go to the place where I knew for 100% certainty it was not my product. Does that make sense? If I'm going to target business, I'm going to target the national brand that's out there because I know with 100% certainty it's not somebody that's packing my product. Is that a fair statement to everybody, if that makes sense? And I don't care where you go, but I want success for me personally. When I would go from a training like this to the street, I wanted success immediately. And to me, the success is going after a brand or an item that you know is not yours. Or you're pretty sure you're not competing against yourself.
We can say that up here. We're being fair on this. But to Jason's point, that's where you engage us, right? Back when I sold the S word, they were very selective about who had it. And it was very special. And now you can go to Restaurant Depot and buy skids of it. So it's not at that level anymore. So why we say that is, who owns Bellissimo? Where are they going to find that? Here, that's it. So allow us where you find the opportunity to help you do that conversion, where it makes sense. Look, it's Frank again. Dun, 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 dun. He's an amazing man.
We started with Frank, we end with Frank, and then you get with Leah and Jason on the back table. So just a quick things, we are a co-op, we're owned by our farmers. That's important. I think it's a sales point. Everybody talks about farm to table.
We're the only co-op.
I'm out here working on behalf of my farmers. We're a very diverse group of farmers, different backgrounds, different ethnicities. So it's very important for us to continue to turn something from them, put good product they give us good product. We want to turn that into good product for you guys to go sell with confidence. We talked about the capital investments that we make as a company. I've worked for 2 canners. I will tell you, I've never seen the amount of capital investments that this canner puts in versus my previous employer. These guys, we do it right. I can't say it enough that we're constantly forward looking, from our farmers to our plant managers to making sure we're getting you guys stuff in the can that you can sell with confidence and not get complaints. Because the worst thing you guys want is complaints. If we want to talk about PCP and what we do to put it into your label, I'm your expert for that. Products, Lee and I can both be experts on that. Michael is a great source as well to help you guys. I don't want you all to leave here and not feel like you have somebody to help you. Please lean on these experts in the market. Leah is one of the best that I have. I cover between the Appalachian and the Rockies, so fairly good market. And she's very thought of highly. As a matter of fact, she'll show you a product that she felt so confident about. She's been on our company for years to make it and said, I can't listen to her anymore. Can somebody help me out? Can we do this? And so this year we nailed it for her. So please, let's get some traction. You guys brought it into house here. You're one of the only ones in the market as of right now that has the product. So I'd encourage you to get out there. It currently is under our label. Hopefully eventually we'll move it onto another label because we're a private label guy. We don't want to sell our label. We want to sell your label. So trust Leah and her team is not going to go out and try and sell my brand unless we don't have it in your label. That make sense?
Now, first of all, we're going to look here to here on this category. Remember, we talked about color, flavor, yield, and just kind of keep all those things in mind. Everything on this table here is a California fresh pack. So, and Jason and I will be specific to let you know as you go through California versus Midwest, fresh pack versus remand, because that's important to taste those variations. So first of all, on the paste. So remember, this is a paste number 10 can, not industrial paste. Industrial paste, I'm pulling everything I can out of it as of water, right? I'm going to pull. This is still going to have some in there, but it's going to sit at about that. They like to have it around that 24 to 26% is what they call it on solids. So this product here, am I going to be able to use this right out of the can? So am I going to typically add water to this? Absolutely. But you'll notice as we go down, because this is a less thick version, will be cooked less than this. So paste is going to be our most concentrated. Then I'm going to go to what I call a 109 puree. So this is a Heinz Escalon. Then I'm going to go to a 107, and then I'm going to go to a 106 as I go down the scale. So remember, as you go down, what do you notice on the color? It lightens. And it's important for you to taste it because I want you to see what happens with the flavor. Now, if I'm worried about yield, what direction do I want to go? That way. If I'm worried about color and flavor, what direction do I want to go? This way. So ask your customer what is important to them. And that's where, remember, yield, flavor, color, yield.
I just want to go back to this. It's important to know that it's a standard of identity for 24% solids, meaning no matter who's making it, it has to have 24% solid. Does that make sense? However, there is a Midwest packer that makes a tomato paste. They're using my tomato paste in a bin and dropping it down to 24% solid. Okay, so you'll see it on the label. These two are both fresh pack California, straight up 24% solids. Does that make sense? The other product will be watered. Oh, it's a puree.
Yeah, that's a 109.
I thought it was a paste. Okay. So on the paste, you'll have a Midwest packer that makes it under their label that is a remanufactured tomato paste that they buy at my 32% and they water it down to 24. So that even though it's 24% solids, it's still been what? Watered down, right? So not only are they cheaper because they're in Indiana, but they're cheaper because they're taking a higher bricks tomato solid and watering it down. Which when you take this and water it down to your recipe, like Leah said, you're using these for recipes, you're then enhancing the tomato flavor within their recipe. Does that make sense to everyone? I just want to touch on that because I know that's got to be in your market.
And you're not getting the yield out of but that's important though. So get your spoons. The vision is come on down and taste these as we go. I don't want to talk through all this and you don't taste it because you'll forget what you're coming to. So from a sales perspective, and then Jason can do the technical perspective from a sales. If it says 109, it's the heaviest. As I go down, 107, 106, right? And there are standards of identity to all that. If it's a 106, it's a 106. Full red puree is a 106. Saporito puree is a 107. So kind of keep that in mind when you're out there taking your two purees and going out there. That's why we have the full red next to the 106.
So
from a technical perspective.
I'll not only do it to technical, but also marketing, right? Marketing, they do not have, I don't believe it says it on the label what it
They
is.
do not.
Okay? That's where we come in to help you guys, right? Let us help you make sure it's the correct match. Now, it's basically based on the flow. So the best way to describe it is if you took like a garden hose and you held that water and you opened a lift, how far would it go out, right? And that's what we're doing on this. So it has a certain amount of time within a minute that the actual tomato solids can gravity feed down this scale. And if it meets within that parameter, that's how it's then classified.
You'll hear them call it the brick scale. Is what it's so just know, if you go to the spec sheet for this, it'll say 106. They don't put it on here to everyone's point.
What's not on there?
106.
But what else is not on there?
A nutritional panel.
That's
Now, when I did this, you weren't even allowed to hand them out, the nutritional panels. Now you can get it online, and it's important because as we go through this, you're going to notice there's a sodium level flavor difference as you go through this, but just know that. Remember, these are all tomato products. I'm going to do something with them. And typically, what am I going to do with them? I'm going to add what? Well, and?
Sugar.
Spices, exactly. So I'm going to add spices to it. So this is a base. These are all bases. So be very careful. If you hand this can out, make sure they make what they need to make with it. Don't just say, here's a spoonful, hope you like it. Unless you're in the state of Indiana again. So weird. They just trawl that stuff. So, I know, it's so weird, but they like it. I don't know. So come on through, but this is, I love this because you can see the color, you can see the viscosity, and you can see where your yield factor is going to be as you go through. So help them understand that. And apples to apples, guys, it's very important. If you're out there and you're cutting against Saporito puree, do not walk in with your 106 puree. That's not going to work.
These two products are going to be your Hispanic market, those people making a sauce with it, it's your price fighter. This looks like it's in a puree where this is a juice. You can tell that by the particulates that's in there. I grew up selling a ton of Hispanic accounts in this trade, and I used to always do a price fighter against my product versus Midwest product. California has a much better body, much heavier product, so when they actually make it in the food safe container that they make it in, ours actually yields out better than what this does. It tends to be thinner, runnier. However, this is in a puree, so it's going to be thicker. I don't compete against a lot of Herschel outside of this market. They're not heavy in the food service side, but you guys do have it. Just understand that you have something if you want to go after that Hispanic trade to go. If you really want to sell the value to your customer and really educate them, they need to move away from this to a diced product or even your tomato strip, because a tomato is how much water? 95% water, right? And my tomatoes are coming from where? California. It takes them a while to get to Ohio, Indiana, right? If it's the other way. If you're on the other side of the Rockies, I don't compete against Midwest at all because it's closer, right? In the Midwest, it's a little bit of a smorgasbord of who somebody wants to do with it until they know the quality difference. So if a Hispanic account is using these and you really want to go in and teach values, I'd move them to your chopped, is how you have it listed, or into diced, because you're paying for less water to come across, because a lot of the water has already left that tomato before we put it in the can.
And for my seasoned people, remember the image of you have a jar. You put baseballs in it. Is it full? No. I put gravel in it. Is it full? No. I put sand in it. Is it full? No. So the point is as we come down from holes to chopped or strips to diced to ground, I'm going to increase my solids and decrease my water. So it's that whole, you think it's full, but it's not full. You can, as I process, or I call it selling up the value scale, you're giving them more solids, less water. So that's important to know too. But the other thing I was going to add, the Midwest versus the California and the flavor of the product, it's important to taste these two side by side. The Hispanic accounts always say, well, this was my giveaway item. First thing, it's free. It's the first thing that the customer eats too, if you think about it. That's the first thing. They take that chip, they dip into the salsa. So if I can improve that first experience for the customer, I think that's a good experience and a good improvement. You guys are priced right here. So why not take them to a California fresh pack? If I go south of Kentucky, you can't sell Midwest tomatoes to Hispanics if you try. They will not use them. Bowling Green and South, nope. It's all California fresh pack down there. That's what they use. And the reason being, they'll tell you, yeah, it's free, but it's their first experience of our meal. And that's what we want. We want that brighter note.
And there's two ways to peel tomatoes, right? Anybody remember what the two ways are?
Lye. They call it lye peeling.
I like that word better. And how does PCP peel their product? And I can almost guarantee you the Midwest does it. So understand that those investments are made for a reason, to give you a quality product. If you're peeling it with chemical, I will be honest with you, we still have one customer that we still do chemical peeling for.
Here, whole peeled pear/plum tomato with basil. So this is your Hispanic. Where am I going to go with these two? Italian, right? And so here's your Alta Cucina. Actually, you know what's missing out of there? What do you not see in this can? Basil. So the little lady was on break that day. Let's just go with the other. And they really started, there were 4 little ladies, not anymore. But so look, she must have been on break that day. So you should have fresh basil in each can of these two, and that's a comparable. But as we go down, so here's here's your chopped tomato, which $74.40. So actually, does anyone know what $74.40 stands for? And I'm going to tell you that because it goes with the whole story that we're talking about. In a can of whole peeled tomatoes, you're going to get about 40 ounces of tomato meat in that can. But as I change the structure of it, and I'm going to get, as I chop it, and I get away from that air space and that water space, you're going to get, in this can, they're guaranteeing you at least 74 ounces of tomato meat. We say 75, and then there's also 80-40, so guess how many they're guaranteeing in that one? 80, okay. But so the point is, they're getting twice as much solid when you go from this to this. So you're giving them more product, per se, less water. Now I'm going to go to the diced, which I'm going to get even more product. Why would I get more product in the diced? Smaller particulate, exactly. So I'm going to get a better yield out of this. Now, some people will say, well, I don't want that industrial look. So take them to your chopped, right? They're typically going to emulsify it again or do something with it. So that's where you would go to the chopped and do that for them. This, they're going to get a better yield. And then one step further, now in this one here is a Midwest. So I want you to taste Midwest versus California. It's important to taste them side by side. We're not in your dice category, but that's why I picked these two, so you can taste Midwest versus California and see what that means for your customer. Then as you come down here with your grounds, So remember I said, so we're doing your ground peeled, which means it has what in it? Does it have skin in it? No. Does it have seeds? Yes, it does. But it's tomato particulates, right? It's going to give me a texture. I love to take this product and add it to one of those products. Why do I want to do that? This is as fresh as it gets. This is taking a tomato, doing that, and putting it in the can. I've done nothing to it. If I'm doing this and that's it, it's fresh. You have that great texture, mouthfeel, color. It gives you the boutique on the pizza. If I'm here, I'm going to have to cook this, and I'm pulling what out of it? What's my goal on this table? I'm pulling the water out. As I do that, I'm going to pull out a little bit of flavor. This will add what back into my product? Flavor. Exactly. I'm going to add the flavor, a little moisture, texture. So this is my favorite item to work with, which is why, as Jason said, I had to create that because I got a little cantankerous on that. So, but make sure Tomato Magic is peeled. 7-Eleven is unpeeled. So that's the one that's unpeeled. I like this the best because I take out the skins. And then I don't have that to worry about on the pizza. Tomato sauce, as Jason touched on, it's important to look here, California. We can help on this one. California, what is this one? Midwest. Remanufactured Midwest. So it's important to taste these side by side so you can see what happens when I reman a product. Now, yield on this one, I'm probably not going to add what back to this?
Water.
Water. So this is not what I call a yield product. Everything on this table, it's yield in the fact that I went from whole to chop. I get more solids, so that's my yield factor on this table. As far as I'm not going to add water back into it. That is what this yield factor table can do for you, is over here. Did you want to add on these?
Well, I think it's important when you look at the dice, when you get over here, look at the water separation versus the California product versus the Midwest. So we opened these at what? We were here at 3 in the morning, but we started opening like at 7, I think, as we started opening cans. But this has been sitting out for what, 3-4 hours? Almost 3 hours. So you can see the separation. So they're going to get that same separation in whatever recipe they're using that with, right? So if you put that in a chili versus the California product in a chili, imagine the difference of the thickness of the chili, if that makes sense to you. So if your customer, if they were to switch and they were to say, man, my chili's really thick now, it's not performing the same, now you know why it's not performing the same, because they need to add some water to it as the Midwest product had the water, just to help you. Yes, sir.
And get more
Yield.
So, our heavies, as we go down the scale here, this is considered your heaviest, right? So this one is going to be darkest as we go down the pike here, but I should be able to add more what to this? Water. I should be able to go can to can with this product right here. Color on this, it's a nice color, right? Because it's a California fresh pack. But as I go down, well, look at that. That's thick. So this product here, there you go. That's a good one right there. So this product here, as you go down the scale, you should have brighter in color. I should be able to add less water to the can as I go down the scale here. So Saporito, we talked about the Stanislaus world, Saporito, full red. If it's Saporito, that's considered their heaviest. If it's full red, that's considered their heavy. So just know that. They don't label it anywhere, but that's just how they do it. So this is going to be in your heavy arena. This here, as I go down, this is in what I call the heaviest. This is your heavy arena. So here, you're going to have and Neil Jones packs this. So this is full red pizza sauce with no basil. So doesn't have dry, doesn't have fresh. But it's interesting here, you have some separation on this. Now, this is their less heavy product, but I don't see separation in your other options. So kind of note that on there. That was it was the same lady. She didn't put any basil in there. Yeah, she was tired that day. Okay, So as you go here, I want you to try this one because it's what? What did we talk about? Remanufactured. It's very important. Are you going to get the yield? No. And you're going to notice the key technical term, it's not going to be as tomatoey. So note that on there. Now, you come down here, I did bring the Bonta, but it's the Bonta concentrated crushed. Technically, I could have put it up here, right, because it's thick. But if it says concentrated crushed, does it have basil in it? No, it is not. So it's kind of comparable to a Saporito pizza sauce with no basil, which is the exact same can code as Saporito concentrated crushed. Now this is a unique item, and I left it like this for a reason. Is that water on the Super Dolce? What is that?
Juice.
What is the natural sugar to a tomato? What is that called? Pectin. So when they make Super Dolce, and Escalon, and I can say because that's when it was, Escalon used to make everything with what was called the cold break method. That meant that the tomatoes only went up to a certain temperature when they cooked it, and it left all the natural pectin in the product. Well, Heinz came along and said, whoa, that is way too expensive. We're going to go to a hot break method. So they changed the Bonta heavier products, and they took them all to what's called a hot break method, which is what Stanislaus does for their product, Neil Jones does for theirs, Pacific Coast Producers does for theirs. So no different. But Stanislaus kept one item, and I'm going to talk about the good and the bad of this. They kept one item under the cold break item, and that's called Super Dolce. What is dolce in Italian? Super sweet. So you have, this is considered a sweeter product. But when I sold this, here's the problem with this. Notice what's happening here. As you come in, Toby, you can come in. Everyone can come in. You need to see this. This is pectin. So I want you to think about that. If I use this product straight and I add water to it and it sits in my make table and then I put it on my pizza and I put cheese on it and toppings on it, where does this go?
In your crust.
In the dough. Gives you pizza brains. This product gave horrific pizza brains to a pizza. It did. Because that pectin blew out of it all the time. So they'd have to take the Super Dolce, it tasted fantastic, and they'd have to blend it. Typically, they would blend it with a little bit of a heavy pizza sauce, or they'd add a little puree to it because they needed to tighten that pectin because it blew out. So I'll show you some ways you can make Super Dolce without utilizing with your products, right? Because it is that natural sweetness, it's delicious. But if I take a heavy pizza sauce and add just a touch of honey, I get the same results and I don't get that pectin blowout. So that's the downside to the cold break method. You can't get around that because it doesn't cook it as high of a temperature, so this is just going to naturally occur. So that's the good and the bad. But that's why you'll get what I call pizza brains on your dough. So if I peel back cheese and I look at the dough after it comes out of the oven and it has those valleys of water, it seems kind of raw, I call that pizza brains because it kind of looks like a brain. So I'm very technical. So, but that's just what I've always called that because it's not quite done, and that's because the moisture is too high being trapped between the dough and the other ingredients. So, because there's nowhere to go. So that's our job to help educate the customer on how do I get around that but get the same flavor results at the end. But this is 51% of the pizza flavor. So this becomes critical, and I know you guys will get, oh, the cheese is wrong, this is wrong, that typically this is wrong. And they never think about the sauce is wrong. So this can make or break the pizza, and it can make it great or it can make it substandard and mushy in the middle. So that's where we want to show you all this, and so you can educate your customer why is it doing what it does. So this table prepares. And as we talked about in the beginning, all these items, you're going to do something with them. It's very important. These items become very subjective. It's what do I like and what do I not like? What is the closest match to something? and what can I do to alter and tweak it to get to that result. So I did put some of these on the table. These two back here. So your full red, fully prepared versus your fully prepared pizza sauce, your Bellissimo. This is a Neil Jones item. This is obviously a Stanislaus item. What I noticed over the years, so years ago, Dino decided, I'm going to grow sunflower seeds fields. This is going to be a great venture. It's going to be awesome. Well, guess what kind of oil goes into every single Stanislaus item product that needs oil? Sunflower seed oil. So just my observation, when that happened, it created a little bit more of a orange residue to it. And it created a little bit more of a blowout. Not huge, but if you have seen it over the years, it was a little bit more orange. Because I'm 99% of the time, I'm going to use this right out of the can. Your product on it, I find over the years, it's a little thicker, right? This has gotten a little thinner over the years. And then if you go up here to Pizziolo, so when they came out with this, the whole idea of that is to have a prepared pizza sauce that had what in it? Texture. A little bit, kind of the idea of taking some ground, adding it to a prepared, and now what did we say the ground will do to the flavor? Makes it fresher, right? Gives it a fresher tone. So what I complained to Jason about is I wanted the same prepared idea. So because I was sick of taking our prepareds and mixing it with our ground peel. So Pacific Coast was very kind and they created a small sample batch that only came to this market. So you guys are the only ones up here that carry this product. And the idea of this is to simulate, but my idea was if you look at this, and this is a great representation, over the years the particulates have gotten larger in here. If I have larger particulates on the pizza, where does that water go? We just talked about it. In the crust, right? So as time has gone on, especially, I know you guys are in Michigan, you go south to where the pizza's thinner, it's way more apparent because there's nowhere for it to go. So when we did this, I said, okay, can we do a prepared? And I'd like to mix it with our ground peeled because they'll give that freshness. They'll be the smallest particulate we have. Because I want that, but not too big because that can be a problem. So that's how we came up with this. And it's a 50-50 mixture, but it gives a really fresh tone. Also, ovens are getting hotter. And if I have a hotter oven, I need to think about this and go to this, because I need to add a little bit of moisture in those aspects. So over here, you have, and we brought this in, I think it was a year ago. So we do for you a fully prepared pizza sauce with Romano cheese. Now, why is Romano cheese a great additive to a pizza sauce? There you go. It's a thickener, right? What do they do when they make sauces? They add what? Cheese. They add cheese to it. So this one here, if they're doing a 50-50 cheese, let's say they're doing a Sofo 50-50 cheese. Now what do you have? What can you call that pizza? A 3-cheese pizza. Legally, you can do that. So this will help thicken it up, but it'll be smooth for you. So it's, once again, it's a subjective flavor profile and if they like it. And then as you go down the scale here, here's your al dente. Remember I talked about targets? Here's your al dente. And here is your gourmet pasta sauce out there in the market. But you'll notice coloration, particulates, carrot puree, onions in the product, all going to be extremely similar. And it's important to see that. And then you go back here, let's say I go south and I'm like, oh, I don't want those particulates in my sauce. I need it smooth. That's where this comes to play. So if you're worried about the particulates blowing out in the recipe and creating too much moisture, take them to your smooth. You have a smooth product for that reason. Still California Fresh Pack. And over here, I pulled a Di Fratelli so you can taste a Midwest pasta sauce next to a California. So you can try that. And then, what did we do here? Oh, I did, just so you can see what you can buy at Restaurant Depot or all the GFS marketplaces. This is another, what I call particulate sauce, pasta sauce, that you can try. But this one here, you got to be careful. These particulates are really big. If I take pasta, and think about it, so you have a pasta place, and they take pasta, and if they don't drain it really well, and I add a large particulate pasta sauce on top, what is that plate going to look like when it hits the customer? Soup, exactly. So it's very important to understand how is your operator serving their product. This little thicker, right? This, woo-wee, you're taking a risk here as far as the particulates and the structure of the product.
It's only $24 a case.
There you go. And guess what? The customer goes, wow, why did I pay $19 for that dish? I got soup. So know what you're selling and why you're selling it to them. It's important. But yeah, super important. You guys go around and try this stuff now. You need to do that. Yes.
So 2 things. One, when you get into the pizza sauces, if you just take a can out of your car, where's the customer have their pizza sauce? Is it in their dry storage room? It is? Or what is it?
It's in a cooler.
It's in the cooler, right? Do you think the flavor is going to be the same if you open up a number 10 can versus a refrigerated tomato product? Probably not, right? So if you're going to actually do the tasting without these guys, please make sure your product is in a can, or not in a can, but in a container, cooled, so they're tasting your product cold versus their product cold.
Or if it needs to be warmed, make sure you warm it. So
Does that make sense?
It's apples to apples.
You will lose most of the time. The other thing is when you're competing against anything that doesn't have a nutritional statement on it, the internet's a great source to get that information. I can assure you I've never lost a cutting where I had the nutritionals, but I've also never won a cutting where I told the chef that his product had too much sodium, unless I had proof that that is the case. So if you're going to work with your customers and help educate them to move them in a direction that you want them to, make sure when you go in to do the cutting, you're prepared. Okay. Secondly, we talked about can codes up there earlier. I did put some can codes on cans that are packers. So these cans codes that you see that are out, those are companies that do private labeling. Okay. So those can codes that you're seeing, if they're on a private label, the brand that you see on the front is the company that's making the private label of whatever product's labeled. Make sense to everybody? I don't know if I explained that right, but the whole idea is if you can recognize this can code and who's on the front of it, that's who's packing whatever label's on the outside of it. Make sense? So I've got one here that's upside down. I've got one here. And then this is...
Escalon Heinz is the only one that still imprints. So
Yeah.
you'll know that's an easy one.
And then I've got mine, right? Because I'm a private label canner. So I wanted you to see that this is what the can code looks like for any of the manufacturers. Though the product can code stamp itself will be different, the format does not change no matter what lipstick or what label is on the outside.
Here is Red Pack Red Gold, and you'll notice on the can, they're big on doing letters, not so much just numbers on their product. So even you'll see some instances where they have words on there too. So they always have a larger font and then a smaller font afterwards. Jones product, how I know is that they usually have a bigger font size, but they do their product first and then they do their production date. But they have 2 lines as well, but I always know that just by their font style. Heinz Escalon is the easiest one to note out there because they still do the imprinted stamp, which other packers don't want to do anymore because they think that it can damage the integrity of the product, but Escalon Heinz still does the stamp on theirs. And that's the only one I know of that does that. Pacific Coast Producers, smaller font, and on all of our cans we put grown in the USA. So that's a very important factor for us. We are proud that we're a co-op, we're farmer owned, and we're all domestic product. So, but you will also, as we talked about can codes, you're going to have the product, and then you're going to have the Julian date of when it was ran. Okay, what I want to do over here for you guys, continue to try stuff, but just to see, you can take one item and give a different flavor profile by just adding one ingredient deck. So over here, using crushed red pepper. If I just add a touch of that, and remember, this isn't a cold state. So if I run through an oven, what's gonna happen as it goes through the oven? Exactly. It's gonna bloom, it's gonna blossom, it's gonna be even spicier. But I want you to go through, so you try the plain product first, then you go over and there's one that has the red pepper. Here, This is probably my favorite because I like honey because it's a natural sweetener, right? And there are people, you go to different areas, they like the local honey idea, makes them feel good and warm and fuzzy. Years ago, we started, because think about it, for us old people, you started with granulated sugar. Then you went, you thought you had great ideas, and you went to brown sugar. And then now, most people have transferred to honey because it dissipates best in the product. So I put this out for a reason, because if you're using or your customer's using sugar or even brown sugar versus more of a natural sweetener, you'll taste the difference between the two. There's a big difference. Plus, you still get a little, especially with sugar. If you go down south, there's a chain in Cincinnati, and they use a lot of sugar. And it's a sugar, they're known for their sugary pizza sauce. And if you're outside that market, no one likes it. So come up and try these, but try this first and then go down the line and see how just a touch can alter what they're doing and help them out.